My family mocked me for being the failure son, so I vanished, built a fortune abroad, and returned only to watch them fight for my approval. I'm a 29-year-old guy, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the family disappointment. It wasn't something they said outright at first. It was in the sighs, the rolled eyes, the way my dad would mutter, "Why can't you be more like your brother?" My family believed success came with a checklist, perfect grades, a corporate job, and bragging rights at family dinners. Unfortunately for them, I was never built for that kind of life. My older brother, Ethan, was the shining example of everything I wasn't. He could walk into a room and make everyone love him. Straight A's, debate captain, and my dad's favorite topic when guests came over. I, on the other hand, loved drawing, sketching characters, designing small projects, experimenting with color. It wasn't productive in their eyes. My dad used to say, "Art won't feed you. Stop daydreaming and start thinking like a man." Every dinner felt like an ambush. My mother would smile awkwardly while Dad compared Ethan's new internship to my wasteful hobbies. Even my uncles joined in, joking that I'd end up painting signs on the street while Ethan ran a company. I tried to laugh it off, but each word chipped away at something inside me. One night, I remember sitting at the table quietly eating while they praised Ethan for getting accepted into a top university. My dad looked at me and asked, "So, what's your plan, artist boy?" I said I wanted to apply to a design school. The room went silent, then he laughed, cold and dismissive. "Design? You'll never amount to anything if you keep chasing fantasies." That line burned into me like a brand. I didn't argue. I just nodded, staring at my plate as the laughter carried on. But deep down, something cracked, a silent promise forming in the quiet humiliation. And that was the night I realized. Maybe I'd have to leave to prove I was worth anything at all. After that night, something inside me just dimmed. I still woke up early, went to work, and pretended to fit into the mold my parents carved for me, but I felt hollow doing it. My dream was to study design, to create something real with my hands. But in my father's house, dreams like that were treated like diseases that needed to be cured. When I got accepted into a small but respected design program in the city, I remember running home with the letter, my heart pounding with hope. I handed it to my parents like it was proof I could finally make them proud. My mother skimmed it, smiling softly, but before she could say anything, my father snatched it from her hands. "A design institute?" He scoffed. "You think I'm going to pay for you to play with crayons while your brother studies finance?" I tried to explain that I'd already applied for scholarships, that I could work part-time to cover the rest. But he wouldn't hear it. "You'll work in an office like everyone else," he said. "It's time you stop embarrassing this family." So I caved. I took a dull data entry job at one of his friend's companies, sitting under fluorescent lights, punching meaningless numbers into spreadsheets. Every keystroke felt like a small betrayal of who I was. I'd stare at the gray cubicle walls, imagining colors, sketches, life, things I wasn't allowed to touch anymore. At family gatherings, the ridicule only got worse. Ethan bragged about his internships while my father grinned proudly beside him. Relatives patted his back and looked at me like I was some cautionary tale. "He's still finding himself," my uncle would joke, and everyone laughed. I'd force a smile and sip my drink pretending it didn't hurt, but quietly I started saving money, a few dollars at a time. Each paycheck I'd hide a little away, like storing fuel for escape. I didn't know where I'd go or how, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't live my whole life being the family's punchline. And with every cruel comment, my plan to leave grew clearer and colder. It happened on a night that was supposed to be all about family pride, Ethan's engagement party. The venue was dripping in gold and marble, the kind of place my parents used to say people of status deserved. I remember standing near the buffet holding a cheap glass of wine, pretending to blend in. Everyone looked expensive, confident, important. Everyone except me. My father had this habit of making jokes at my expense, and that night he was in rare form. He clinked his glass and started thanking everyone for coming, boasting about Ethan's new job and his bright future. Then, with a smirk, he said, "And of course, let's not forget my other son, the creative one. The room chuckled. He's still figuring things out, aren't you, son? Laughter rippled through the crowd. Ethan joined in, patting my shoulder like I was some pity project. My throat tightened, but I managed a forced smile. I wanted to disappear, to vanish into the wallpaper. Then my father added, maybe one day he'll design something useful, like a plan for his life. That line broke me. The humiliation was too loud, too sharp. I left my drink on the table and walked out before anyone noticed. I remember stepping into the cold night air, my hands shaking. The sound of their laughter followed me out like an echo I couldn't escape. When I got home, I packed my bag. No hesitation this time. Clothes, sketchbook, passport, and the small stash of savings I'd been building. As I zipped it shut, I overheard Ethan's voice from the next room, bragging to his fiancée, "He's jealous, that's all. Some people just can't handle being mediocre." That was the final nail in the coffin. I didn't leave a note. I didn't look back. At 2 a.m., I booked the cheapest one-way flight out of the country. As the plane lifted off hours later, I watched the city shrink beneath me, the place that had never believed in me finally disappearing. I didn't know it yet, but that night would be the start of everything. Landing in a new country felt like stepping into someone else's life, one where no one knew me. No one mocked me, and no one expected me to fail. But freedom came with a price. My savings barely covered 2 weeks of rent in a rundown hostel. The air smelled like damp concrete and instant noodles, and my mattress sagged like it had given up years ago. Still, it was mine. It was quiet. It was peace. The first few months were brutal. I applied for every job I could find. Waiter, cleaner, delivery driver, and faced rejection after rejection. My accent tripped me up in interviews, and sometimes people laughed when I mispronounced words. I remember standing in a tiny cafe bathroom one night, staring at my reflection under flickering fluorescent lights, whispering, "You left everything for this?" But giving up wasn't an option. I started freelancing online, offering cheap design work to small businesses. Most clients ghosted me after one project, but a few stuck around. I'd work until sunrise, my eyes burning, fingers cramped, chasing just enough money to survive another week. Some nights I'd eat bread and peanut butter and tell myself it was a designer's meal. Slowly, things began to shift. I taught myself new tools, watched tutorials, and poured every ounce of pain into my work. I stopped caring about perfection and focused on purpose. I'd walk through the city after midnight, sketching storefronts, buildings, people, anything that reminded me I was still alive. Then one day, a small tech startup reached out. They'd seen my designs online and wanted to hire me for a branding project. It wasn't huge money, but it was validation. The first time someone saw value in what I created. I remember closing my laptop that night, tears burning in my eyes. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the failure son. I felt like someone worth believing in. But, as I'd soon learn, success can be a quiet thing until the world that doubted you starts noticing. Over the next few years, my life slowly transformed, not in one dramatic moment, but through hundreds of late nights and tiny victories. The small branding project led to another, then another. Word spread. My designs started popping up on websites, product packaging, even cafe windows. It was surreal. My work was visible even if my name wasn't. I rented a modest apartment. One room, cracked tiles, leaky faucet. But to me, it was a castle. I filled it with color, sketches taped to the walls, cheap plants by the window, a desk that doubled as my dining table. I'd sit there every night, designing for clients across time zones, the hum of my old laptop becoming a kind of heartbeat. Eventually, I built a small agency. Just me and 2 freelancers I met online, both hustling like their lives depended on it. We worked through weekends, learning as we went, failing constantly but never stopping. There was beauty in that chaos. Still, I kept my success a secret. My online name didn't match my real one. I didn't want my family finding out. Maybe I wasn't ready to face them. Or maybe a part of me wanted to see how far I could go without their validation. One night, I checked Ethan's social media out of curiosity. He was still the golden boy, expensive suits, beach vacations, family dinners. My parents looked older but proud, their smiles fixed around him. Not one mention of me, not a trace. That used to hurt, but now I just felt nothing. Instead, I focused on the people who believed in me. My clients, my tiny team, the strangers who appreciated my craft. Every design felt like a middle finger to my past, a quiet rebellion dressed in creativity. I wasn't rich yet, but I was free. And for the first time in my life, freedom felt better than approval ever could. But just when I started believing I'd left that old world behind, it found a way to come knocking again. It started with an email. One I almost deleted, thinking it was spam. The subject line read, "It's Mom. Please read." My chest tightened before I even opened it. I hadn't heard from her in nearly 6 years. Her message was shaky and short. "Your father's sick. Ethan's in trouble. We need help." For a long moment, I just stared at the screen, numb. The words didn't make sense. I reread them, half expecting it to vanish. But it was real. Attached were hospital documents, medical bills, and, buried at the bottom, a message that said, "Please don't ignore us. You're our only hope." I sat there, motionless, listening to the city noise outside my window. A part of me felt pity. Another part, disbelief. These were the same people who told me I'd never amount to anything. The same father who mocked my dreams was now the one who needed me. Over the next few days, curiosity got the better of me. I looked up Ethan online. His once flashy Instagram was filled with cryptic quotes and vague posts about loyalty and fake people. Then I found an article. My father's company had collapsed after Ethan's bad investments. The empire they'd worshipped had crumbled from the inside. For a moment, I felt something I didn't expect. Not joy, not revenge, just silence. A kind of karmic stillness. I didn't reply to my mother's email. Not directly. Instead, I wired a large sum of money anonymously to the hospital account listed in her attachments, signing it only as a friend. That night, I couldn't sleep. My phone buzzed with messages from old relatives gossiping about my family's downfall, each one dripping with irony. The golden son had lost everything, and the failure's son, the ghost, had quietly saved them without them ever knowing. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, whispering to myself, "Funny how life evens the score when you stop chasing fairness." But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. Weeks passed, and I told myself I was done thinking about them. But the truth was, their ghost lingered in everything I did. Every client email, every payday, every night I looked out the window at the skyline. I wondered if they'd ever realize it was me who'd helped them. Probably not. And maybe that was the point. Then one morning, as I scrolled through my phone half awake, I saw Ethan's name trending locally back home. Curiosity pulled me in. He had posted a desperate video talking about fake friends and how everyone abandoned him when things went south. His voice cracked mid-sentence, his arrogance gone. The comment section was brutal. People mocked him, others pitied him. For the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt distance, like I was watching a stranger whose story had once overlapped with mine. My brother, the golden child, was now the one struggling for validation. The irony was too poetic. A week later, my mother emailed again, this time longer. She said Dad was home from the hospital, but weaker, quieter. "He keeps asking if you'll ever forgive him," she wrote. "He said he sees you in his dreams." I didn't know how to respond. My hands hovered over the keyboard for minutes before I shut the laptop. That night, I walked through the streets aimlessly. The city buzzed with life, laughter, music, movement, everything my home had never been. I passed a cafe window and saw a family eating together, smiling, teasing each other gently. My chest ached with something I couldn't name, grief, maybe, for the family I wished I'd had. I realized something then. I'd built success, independence, even peace. But forgiveness, that was still buried deep under years of bruises and words that never healed. And part of me knew. Sooner or later, I'd have to face them. if only to see what remained of the people who once broke me. 8 years. That's how long it had been since I'd heard their voices in person, smelled the house I grew up in, or stood under the same roof as my father. When I finally decided to go back, it wasn't revenge that drove me. It was curiosity. I wanted to see what time had done to them, and what distance had done to me. I landed quietly, no announcements, no grand arrival. Just a man with a suitcase, walking through a city that once suffocated him. Everything looked smaller. The streets, the houses, even the sky. I rented a car, the kind of modest luxury my father used to brag about affording, and drove straight to the old neighborhood. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. The gate to my parents' house creaked when I pushed it open. Paint chipped, grass overgrown. I could hear the faint sound of a TV inside. When my mother opened the door, she froze. Her lips parted, but no words came out, just tears. "You came back," she whispered, her voice trembling. My father appeared moments later, leaning on a cane. His once intimidating frame had shrunk. The man who used to tower over me now looked fragile, small. His eyes widened, disbelief and shame mixing in a way that made my stomach twist. "You're alive," he said quietly, as if he couldn't believe it. I nodded. Always was. The silence that followed was heavier than any insult he'd ever thrown. Ethan came down the stairs, slower, heavier, his confidence gone. He tried to smile, but it faltered when he saw my suit, my car parked outside, the quiet composure I carried. "Hey, brother," he said, forcing a chuckle. "Long time. Yeah," I replied softly. "It really has been." The room smelled like nostalgia and dust, familiar yet foreign. They looked at me as if they weren't sure whether to hug me or apologize, and for the first time, I realized I wasn't coming home as the failure they remembered, but as a man they could no longer define. The next few days felt like living in an alternate universe. The same house, the same walls that once echoed with ridicule, now filled with awkward silences and forced politeness. My mother kept hovering, offering tea, asking if I was comfortable. My father mostly sat in his armchair pretending to read the newspaper, stealing glances at me when he thought I wasn't looking. But what struck me most was how different their energy was. There was no arrogance anymore, no superiority. It was as if life had stripped them of the right to judge. Every word I spoke carried a weight it never had before. For the first time, they listened. Word spread quickly. Relatives started visiting. Aunts, uncles, cousins who once called me the waste of space. They arrived with sweet smiles and lines like, "We always knew you'd make it big one day." I played along, polite but distant. They didn't deserve anger anymore, only indifference. Ethan, though, was a different story. He tried to rekindle that old brotherly charm, talking about starting fresh and family unity. But his eyes kept darting toward my watch, my shoes, the car keys on the counter. One night he said, "You've done well, man. Maybe you could, help me get back on my feet. Just a loan, to rebuild." I looked him straight in the eye and said, "I think you already got your chance." His smile vanished. "Don't do this," he muttered. "We're family." I leaned back, calm, collected. "Funny. I used to say the same thing when you all laughed at me." The silence that followed was thick, choking. My father shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. For the first time in my life, I realized power doesn't come from revenge. It comes from no longer needing their approval. I wasn't their failure anymore. I was their mirror, showing them everything they'd thrown away, and that reflection was starting to eat them alive. The breaking point came on a Sunday evening, the same kind of night. We used to have family dinners, where I was always the silent target. My mother had cooked my father's favorite meal, hoping it would somehow bring us together again. But tension hung in the air thicker than the smell of spices. Ethan sat across from me, arms crossed, eyes sharp. My father cleared his throat and muttered, "You've done well for yourself." It wasn't a compliment. It was an acknowledgement wrapped in resentment. "Yeah," Ethan added coldly, "must be nice, running off and coming back with a fortune while we were stuck cleaning up your mess." I blinked, stunned. "My mess?" I asked. "You mean the business you tanked and the debts you created while mocking me for chasing a dream?" His jaw clenched. "You don't know what it was like holding this family together What? I cut him off. While I worked 16-hour days in a country where I didn't even speak the language? While I went hungry just to prove that I wasn't the failure you all said I was?" The room fell silent. My mother whispered, "Please, stop." But I couldn't. Not anymore. My father slammed his hand on the table. "Enough. This family fell apart because you walked away." I laughed. Bitter, quiet, exhausted. "No," I said, voice trembling. "This family fell apart because you only loved the version of me that never existed." For a long moment, no one spoke. My father's eyes dropped. Ethan looked away. My mother just cried softly into her napkin. The illusion of family, of unity, of love, shattered completely. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and looked at them one last time. "You wanted a success story?" I said quietly. "Here it is. But don't ever forget, you built it out of rejection." As I walked out, my father's voice cracked behind me, small and broken. "Son, wait." I didn't, because for the first time in my life, leaving didn't hurt anymore. After that dinner, I checked into a hotel across town. I didn't tell them where. I needed air that didn't smell like the ghosts of old expectations. That night, lying in the dim light of the hotel room, I stared at the ceiling and asked myself what came next. I'd spent years chasing validation, then years escaping it. I'd won the silent war, but the victory felt hollow. A week later, I visited my father's old office building. It was abandoned, windows dusty, his nameplate still bolted to the door. Richard Wells and Sons Trading Co. I stood there for a long time, running my fingers over the engraved letters. That's when the idea came to me. Not revenge, not pity, but something different. Closure. 3 months later, I launched a scholarship fund in my father's name, the Richard Wells Foundation for Creative Arts. It was for kids like me, dreamers mocked for choosing color over conformity. I funded it quietly, with no press, no family involvement. I just sent an invitation to my mother, asking her to attend the launch if she wished. The event was simple but elegant. Art students, local media, a few colleagues from abroad. I gave a short speech about believing in dreams that others can't see yet. When I mentioned my father's name, I saw her. My mother, standing in the back, eyes red, hand pressed to her chest. Later that night, she approached me. "He would have been proud," she said, voice trembling. I smiled gently. "Maybe, but I didn't do it for him. I did it for the kid he never saw." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "He talked about you every day before he—" Her voice broke. "He regretted everything." I didn't reply. I just handed her a brochure for the foundation and whispered, "It's okay." Regret was always his burden, not mine. As I watched her leave, I felt a strange peace settle inside me. Not triumph, not revenge, just release. And for the first time, the word family didn't hurt anymore. A year later, I returned home one last time. Not for business, not for closure, but for goodbye. My father had passed away quietly in his sleep. The news came in a short message from my mother. "He's gone. He wanted you to have his watch." When I arrived, the house felt smaller than ever. Time had stripped it of its arrogance. The walls were still lined with Ethan's framed awards, but the gold had dulled. My mother hugged me without words, her grip fragile but desperate, as if afraid I'd vanish again. Ethan was there too, sitting by the window, older, defeated. He didn't meet my eyes. We buried my father on a calm, overcast morning. As the priest spoke, my mind drifted. I remembered all the nights I spent sketching in secret, the insults, the humiliation, and how every cruel word had unknowingly built the man standing there now. I didn't cry, not because I felt nothing, but because I had already mourned him years ago, back when he told me I'd never amount to anything. After the funeral, I stayed behind as everyone left. The air was cold, the grass damp under my shoes. I placed his old wristwatch on the headstone, scratched, faded, but still ticking. "I made it," I whispered. "Not to prove you wrong, but to prove I was never broken." The wind carried the words away, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to be heard. I turned, walked back toward the car, and glanced once at the house in the distance. It no longer looked like home, just a place where I'd once learned what love shouldn't feel like. As the city skyline reappeared in the distance, my phone buzzed, a notification from one of the scholarship students. "Thank you for believing in people like me." I smiled. That single message meant more than any apology I'd ever get. Because in the end, I realized something powerful. Sometimes the best revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's living so well that their opinion no longer matters. And with that thought, I finally let them go.